Good evening and welcome to the Press Box. I'm Vanessa Johnson, and for the next 30 minutes, I'll be your host. With me are Ty Reynolds and Jeff Richardson. How you guys doing?
Happy to be here tonight.
Super Bowl weekend. Okay. Let's start off talking about the Atlanta Knights. What's the status of this team after going into the All-Star break?
Well, after the All-Star break here, well, first of all, this team is on a 5-game stretch where I think that they can win every game. Well, they didn't win the first one when they played Kansas City. They lost that, and of course, the shootout on the road.
Right.
Okay, then they came back and they won the next game. Now you got this break. You got this Red Army game in the middle of the stretch, which I really don't like, but they're going to have to put up with it anyway. I guess money jumps into everything. It's maybe a way for the IHL to make a quick buck. Okay. Then you got a home game against Kansas City. That's not a very good club. They should beat them. And then they got 2 home games against Salt Lake City. Again, games at home, when you don't play very good teams, you should win those games. You shouldn't depend on shootouts. You should just flat out go out and win these games. And that's an easy stretch for them. They're in first place right now, and they're in a very tough league, and they have to be happy where they are. But when you have these easy stretches come up, you have to take advantage of them.
Well, Ty, you mentioned Friday night's game being lost in the shootout again. They had a 4-0 lead in that hockey game and still lost it in the shootout. So Coach Obriaco couldn't have been happy about that. Of course, they were coming off the All-Star break, and they might have just been lazy and took it for granted they were going to win that hockey game.
Well, when you have these easy games, well, I think that against teams you should beat, Jeff. I mean, you have to take advantage of it because sometimes you're going to play well sometime, you're going to play bad sometime. When you hit these bad streaks, that's where you really have to take advantage of these situations where you have these games that you can win. He has got to take advantage of that. And if this team goes 4-0-1 during that 5-game stretch, they'll be happy.
Right. You mentioned they have the Red Army team coming in Thursday night. That's the same team that comes to the Olympics and has been kicking everybody's butt the last few decades, minus a couple of top players. But those guys can really skate, and I look for it to be a very high-scoring hockey game, and I think the Knights will probably get beat. Unfortunately, it's going to count in the standings. They're going to make a tour of the IHL and play everybody one time, it sounds like.
Well, I agree with you. When you got those Soviets out there, they skate circles around NHL players just about when I see them against that type of competition. So when they go against IHL players, look out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I'd like to take this time and remind our viewers that this is a live show. You can call us at 873-6713. Okay, guys, let's talk about the Super Bowl. Everyone was talking about this was the big rematch. It looks like a replay because that's exactly what happened.
Well,
what
almost.
Yeah.
I really thought that Buffalo would stay within the spread, and it looked like they had everything going their way in the first half. That they were moving the ball well. They had well over 200 yards in the first half, and I thought Marv Levy just had a great game plan. His defense was really, well, his linebackers were very active, and they had to be to cut down the Dallas, the way Dallas uses their running backs, especially Emmitt Smith, on those counter plays where he bounces to the outside and throwing to him out of the backfield. They stopped that. They stopped a lot of things. Then all of a sudden, Thurman Thomas just fumbles not once but twice. Here's your man, one of your bread and butter men, and all of a sudden this guy just really changes the momentum of the game. And everyone seems to sit there and point that this was the turning point. To me, there's no doubt that's the turning point. Buffalo went flat after that, and yeah, that really hurt them. And after that, it was a stomp.
Well, you're right, Ty, but you mentioned Buffalo playing well in the first half. I sort of questioned when on one of their drives, they settled for a field goal, and they seemed like they probably could have gone and scored a touchdown if they'd wanted to go for it on 4th and short there down inside the 10-yard line. Do you remember that?
Well, what I remember that's significant to me is as time was running out, where they settled for the field goal, and on 3rd down, where you have to go for the end zone, he throws a Utah pass. Now, this thing wasn't working all night anyway. I mean, and so they used this play about 4 times in this football game.
You're talking about the where it snapped right at the
right, where they just wipe the running back loops around, and then they just throw them a little underhanded pass in front. And that's nice if you want to get the ball to Thurman Thomas, but Dallas was looking for that. They had already seen it. So I don't know why he ran that play 4 times.
You agree that the change was immediately after the beginning of the second half, right?
Definitely. I mean, I think Buffalo just went flat after that fumble. They said, here we go again. There's no doubt in my mind.
Well, the Bills need to do something. What do you think the future changes need to be?
Well, first of all, if I'm Buffalo, I've got to go out there and try and get some speed in my secondary. A lot of times you just need to have the type of cornerback They can just go one-on-one with someone, a great wide receiver, and neutralize them. And You can only be as aggressive as your corners are on your defense. If your corners aren't good enough, you cannot be that aggressive. You're going to pay, especially against good teams and well-coached teams like Dallas. That's one of the changes I would make. Another change I would make, yes, I would look at getting another running back. Year after year, you see Thurman Thomas. Yeah, he plays great and gets them up to the big game. I just don't think he's really performed that well in these games. I think that if you take the amount of money that he earns and go out and sign some free agents and then get a different running back there that maybe you can have better luck with down the road, might be a better move. I think that if Buffalo ever wins a Super Bowl, it's going to have to be because they improved their secondary, and they're going to have to win this thing with Jim Kelly.
Okay, well, they are a good team because they're still a team in the AFC.
Oh, they're a great
beat.
team. I mean, anyone that goes to the Super Bowl 4 years in a row is a great team.
Well, I think you hit it right on the head by mentioning they are from the AFC, and they play two different types of football in the NFC and the AFC. It's just entirely two different worlds, basically. In the NFC, you have ground-oriented attacks and great defenses. In the AFC, you have passing attacks and not-so-good defenses, and that's why the NFC wins the Super Bowl every year.
Yeah.
Well, there's, a stretch of 10 years, something like that, Jeff. But the thing that impresses me about Buffalo is that they've had very successful seasons year after year, and when you have successful seasons, that means the NFL makes a harder schedule for you. Mm-hmm. So outside of their conference, which I think the AFC East is not very strong, the NFL did put quality teams on their schedule, and they came out and had an excellent record. I mean, they were the home team in the AFC. So I can go for that argument a little bit, but no, they had good NFC teams like Dallas on their regular season schedule.
Yeah, but I mean, they only play so many NFC teams, like you mentioned. They're in a weak division, so they got 8 games against some patsy opponents right there, with the exception of maybe Miami.
Jeff, I tell you what, you're going to several years from now, you're going to look at it and wonder why. Well, why did Buffalo not win these games? And you're going to sit there and look at that Dallas team as being one of the two best, these two Dallas teams that have won the Super Bowl these last 2 times. You're going to see them as being one of the best football teams that you can remember. This team is going to rank up there with the Pittsburgh clubs and with Bill Walsh's San Francisco teams.
I'd have to agree with you. I think Jimmy Johnson is probably one of the greatest coaches of all time already. Boy, the guy knows how to coach football.
Speaking of Jimmy Johnson, what does the future hold from him?
Jeff, what do you think?
Well, we heard a rumor today that Jacksonville is trying to get him to come down and interview for the job, and I can't imagine Jerry Jones letting him do that. On the other hand, you hear there's a little bit of friction in there maybe between Jerry Jones and Jimmy Johnson. Let me get their names straight first. I think there's a little friction between the two of them, and you may see Jimmy jump ship and go to Jacksonville.
I don't think you would, not anytime soon. And the reason I feel that way is because this is Jimmy Johnson. This guy's got a big ego. I mean, this guy cannot, him and Jerry Jones barely fit into Texas Stadium. Thank God they got the hole in the roof of the field. Jimmy Johnson has won 2 straight Super Bowls. This guy has a chance to win 3 straight. He's got an excellent chance. If he wins 3 straight, don't be surprised if he hangs around and puts up with any animosity that he has to and goes for 4. This guy has got a big ego. Wouldn't it just be wonderful for himself to go out there and say, hey, I won 3 Super Bowls in a row, or the heck with this 3-peat stuff, I've won 4 in a row. I think he would go for something like that.
Well, what about the fact that he could take a franchise and basically build it from scratch, like he did with Dallas pretty much, because they were pretty much down in the hole?
Well, if he wins so many Super Bowls in a row, there's always going to be a team waiting to try and get him away and offer him part of the team to get him to coach and maybe be general manager and do whatever the heck he wants, just as long as he comes around.
I think that's probably what Jacksonville has in mind, is to give him a piece of the ownership, which would be pretty attractive if I was him.
Well, that may be down the road, but I don't think anytime soon. I think Jimmy Johnson is out for number 1, Jimmy Johnson.
All right, I agree with Ty. I think he's going to stay because Dallas is already favored to win next year.
Surprise, surprise.
Okay. Let's go on and talk about recruiting. We're on the eve of signing date now. What's the latest commitments?
Jeff, there had been a couple that that Georgia got. Why don't you hit on that? Because I don't think the paper had gotten to it, and I don't think a lot of the people know about these folks that they had gotten.
Well, I think 2 that the paper hasn't mentioned yet are a lineman from Jacksonville named Chris Terry, a pretty highly rated lineman. He's going to play defensive end, probably 6'6", 230 pounds. And another guy is Armin Love, the big safety out of Houston, Texas.
Now, Love he just made his last trip to Oklahoma and chose Georgia over Oklahoma and Baylor. And what did Whitaker, the analyst in Alabama, say about the defensive lineman Terry? out of Jacksonville.
Well, he
about the weight.
Well, he said he's about 230 pounds. He compared him to a player named Trevor Price, who committed to everybody last year and went up at Michigan finally. He did dump Georgia at the last minute. Big, aggressive, fast, defensive end kind of guy. You put about 20, 30 pounds on him, and he's probably going to be another Freddie Gilbert, maybe.
So Whitaker feels that his frame will hold maybe 260
he
when
said,
he gets to be about 20 years
40
old.
pounds onto it.
Okay.
What about Travis Stroud?
Travis Stroud, Jeff, we both feel this way. We think he's going to go to Georgia. He's holding a press conference, at Dunwoody tomorrow at 1:30.
Right.
And we really think Georgia's in the lead. Georgia Tech thinks they have a shot, and Notre Dame is very interested. They're holding scholarships for him, but I think he'll play football in Athens.
What about Frizzell?
Joaquin Frizzell out of Peach County. There was rumors that he had committed to Michigan, and there were rumors that he was still thinking about Georgia and Florida. I don't think Georgia's in the picture here anymore, Jeff. It looks like just going through the list of names that we have, there's just not any more scholarships available. So I think he's going to stay up there and go up north unless as Jeff calls him, the evil genius down in Gainesville can pull one off.
Well, this is, we mentioned in the paper, he said in the paper that Georgia was his best visit, and it was this past weekend. He is from Peach County High School, which is about 2 hours down the road. I think the Georgia coaches are hoping that he will change his mind here in the last 3 days, and he's one of the kind of guys that even if you've got 25 commitments, you're going to take this guy because he's a hell of a ball player.
Not only that, an excellent student.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What about the other schools in the South, like Tennessee? Who are they recruiting?
Well, Tennessee is suffering a couple of losses here. First of all, they had thought that they had gotten a commitment from an all-world tight end, Patterson, out in Texas. Well, we just found out today that he is not going to go to Tennessee, that he is going to go to a black college, such as Southern or Alcorn State, because that's a place that his father wants him to go to, and he wants to make his father proud. So I think he's backing off of Tennessee. And they're losing a defensive back out of Tennessee as well, or rather out of Texas, and he is going to pick Baylor and go to Baylor.
Baylor's having a pretty good year.
They are. They're getting a lot of kids out there in Texas, but there's so many of them out there that want to stay home.
All right. What about
Georgia's getting a couple out of Texas. A running back named David Williams, who's not well known, but evidently a pretty good tailback according to the coaches up in Athens.
I think that David Williams is the type of player that people like because of his flexibility, that he can play one of three positions, a tailback, a wide receiver, or a safety position. And I remember a couple of years ago that Georgia had a couple of guys come out of Texas. One was Brian Cleveland, and he really didn't turn into much because he was injured a lot of time. And some other guy out of Houston named Rodney Hampton, who's playing in the NFL now, starting for the Giants. So you never do know about these low-key guys out of Texas.
Okay, in Alabama?
Alabama has gotten a great big commitment today, and I think Alabama may end up being the #1 team in the Southeastern Conference.
Yes.
I think with the losses that Tennessee has had, with the two guys from Texas, although they are going to get the other two running backs from Dallas Carter, they will keep those. Alabama got the Town Creek Trio, Stephen Harris, Chris Hood, Montoya Madden, and they're going to get Eric Curley, the big defensive tackle out of Birmingham. He's about 6'2", 290, and that's a player that Georgia desperately wanted badly, one of these big defensive tackles that we need. But he's going to stay home and go to Alabama, and with the success they have on defense over there under Bill Oliver, I can't blame them.
Okay. What about Auburn? They don't have to do much recruiting. They had a good year last year.
Auburn's an interesting story. I think they're getting their butts kicked over in Alabama this year. They haven't recruited well in state, and they've taken just about every borderline grade case you can get over here. So.
Well, with some of the kids in the state of Georgia here, they got a commitment from Adam Bailey. And when you look at Steve Figueroa's high school football magazine, which is, if there's anyone that knows high school football in Georgia, it's Figueroa. And the scoop on Adam Bailey, 1.9 GPA. They got a commitment out of Kevin McLeod of Clarkston, a 1.8 GPA. And then they got a commitment out of LaFonso McLean out of Gray, Georgia, down there around Jones County. Needs more math to qualify, is the quote under him. And you're just taking chances when you do this type of thing, but if Bowden can get him into school and keep him in there, well, I guess the gamble paid off.
Well, I think they'll get him in school and keep him, but it's a good question about how they're doing it. I don't.
Well, yeah, you're right about that.
Something funny's going on, I think.
Yeah. Okay, what about Florida State? This #1 team.
Oh, well, I think Florida State will probably have the #1 recruiting class. I mean, you just look at these linebackers that they're getting. Two of the top linebackers in the South, is Green out of Miami. People are comparing him to Marvin Jones, and Demetrius Stevens out of Washington County High here in Sandersville. Then they get two more studs down in the state of Florida, Henry Grant.
Lamar Glenn.
Yeah, out of St. Petersburg and Daytona Beach, respectively. So they're cleaning up. Florida State's almost getting everyone who they want. They got Robert Hammond, the top defensive back out of the Southwest area, out of Louisiana. I mean, Bowden basically goes around and gets whoever he wants. It almost makes me sick.
Well, you forgot to mention they came up here and took the two best players out of Georgia pretty much, too. Demetrius Stevens, the linebacker, and Sean Mitchell, the defensive lineman that I know the University of Georgia would have died to get. I mean, I can't believe we let them get away.
Well, it happens. Now, what really amazes me was what Alabama did. Here they are, they compete with Auburn, an 11-0 team in their own state. And Alabama, like you said, Jeff, basically whipped them in their own state. And here it is. There was a lot of big-time talented players that a lot of schools like Florida State and Notre Dame would have liked to come down here and gotten. Alabama kept them out, and they kept Auburn out. I think Gene Stallings and his crew over there did the best job. He had a lot to lose, and he fought them off.
Do you think that recruiting is going to make Florida State a #1 team again?
Oh, it's possible, as long as they stop missing field goals in close games.
I think if the question is will they be rated #1 going into next season, I think there's no doubt they will be.
They have so many talented players, and a lot of these guys see what Bobby Bowden sends to the NFL, and that tells them a lot right there. That's what a lot of these kids want to do. They want to play pro. They see all the big money, and you can't argue with the success that some of the people have had from Florida State.
Boy, Brad Scott's been given all the credit for starting that recruiting trend or tradition down there. He left for South Carolina this year, and they lost a couple of other assistants. And there's been rumors that Bowden's going to retire within the next year or two, and they just still keep loading up on the talent. How do they do it?
I don't know, and to me, I wondered about that myself. I thought that had an effect on Florida this year. I think Florida missed out on some players, and one of the reasons I feel that way, Jeff, is because you have these people thinking that Steve Spurrier sometime, sooner or later, is going to make that jump to the NFL. And before Spurrier got there, that Florida program was in a lot of trouble and really had bad football teams until he got there. So if he leaves, I think that there's not too much confidence in who they could get. But I certainly think Florida's an excellent program.
Okay. I'd like to take this time and remind our viewers that this is a live show. So if you have any questions, you can give us a call at 873-6713. Okay, let's talk about college basketball. We have Georgia, who started the season with a 3-0 in the SEC, and now it seems like they're going down.
And down and down and down.
Where's the bottom?
That's 3-0 start, and he had a win over Kentucky. That was nice, but that was a very deceiving picture here. This is the same team that constantly turns the ball over. This team turned the ball over about 29 times to Texas and turned it over 27 times the day before against Ole Miss. I mean, Ole Miss, that's a bad basketball team. They threw it away 27 times against them at home. This is the same team that misses free throws all the time and shoots about 50% from the line. Georgia is not a good team. And as the usual tradition goes, before signing date, you're sitting there looking at the schedule, trying to finagle wins that you can salvage at the end of the year to get an NIT bid. That's the Georgia basketball tradition.
Well, there was a lot of pressure on Hugh Durham this year to actually put together a winning season and make the tournament. And I got to question whether the players have they quit on him or what, because they got plenty of talent up there. That we should be winning a lot more ball games than we have.
Or I don't know if the game has just passed him where his style of play just doesn't win. I mean, when I look at Georgia, first of all, with the way Hugh Durham handles a program, he tries to recruit the best players in the state of Georgia. Well, what happens if you don't have good players once in a while? What happens if they go out of state? What happens if they don't qualify? You had a guy like D'Antonio Wingfield, who really was really a bad apple, I think, from what I've read about him and the trouble he's been up there in Cincinnati all the time, cutting classes and being suspended by Bob Huggins. But Huggins had to come down here, get him out of the Albany high school system, and stick him up there in a school in Cincinnati just so he could somehow miraculously get his grades up, qualify, make his test score, and become eligible his freshman year. I mean, if you have a bad apple like that as your top player in the state, well, you're probably not going to have a chance to get them because of grades. And so what are you going to do? Well, you're just going to take the second and third best players in the state And then you still have to fight Georgia Tech, who, if there's really good players like James Forrest, Georgia Tech's going to get them from you. So you need to go other places, and he stays here locally. Another thing he doesn't have is a point guard. Why doesn't he get a point guard? The last time I saw this team have a really good point guard was when they went out of the region, went up to New York, and got Vern Fleming down here, and that was the team that went to the Final Four. I don't agree with this philosophy. I think Hugh Durham's a nice man. I know him personally. He's got a great sense of humor, but the thing is, the bottom line is you have to win basketball games, and he's not doing it.
Well, you know the alumni are getting restless with him. You think he's going to hang around next year?
Yeah.
Well, he'll hang around as long as he can, but if it's up to him. But if Georgia does not make the NCAAs, which I don't think they will, and if they go into the NITs and get dumped immediately in the first round, like they always seem to, they've got to look at making a change. And if Vince Dooley does not make a change, I've got a problem with that because that's telling me that they really don't care. That's just saying, we don't care about this team.
Well, I think you can go ahead and book that. I don't think Vince Dooley's fired a coach in football or basketball ever. So.
Well, you know, I think it comes down to money, and basketball could generate a whole lot of money for a school. And not only that, you've got potential contracts coming up that was in the Atlanta paper today with the SEC possibly cracking a deal with CBS, and other leagues possibly get involved as well. And now what CBS may do is to go out and honor the SEC with their basketball as well. So you need, to market yourself as a league and as a team, as a school, you need to sit there and have someone come down and get you going in the right direction. Hugh Durham, I just don't think has his team going where Georgia would like to be.
I think he's reached a comfort zone where he's not going to be able to take him up to the next level. You mentioned a player that, D'Antonio Wingfield had to go up to Cincinnati to graduate from high school, and I hate to take a knock at Tech because I know Vanessa likes them, but a couple of years ago there was a player named Martise Moore who was not going to graduate from the Atlanta schools here, and he went to Virginia, graduated from high school, and now he's back at Tech.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
Maybe we should play the same game. I mean, if the guy's got grade problems, let's send him out of state so he can graduate.
Well, I think the case with Martise Moore is somewhat prevalent. I'm not as familiar with that as I am with Wingfield, but what they did with Moore happens with a lot of people in a lot of schools.
Then why can't we do it?
I think that it has something to do with your president. Here's Charles Knapp, who I really don't think gives the athletic department the support that some of the other presidents do at other locations. I mean, can you imagine if he were at another school and saw maybe what we talked about with Auburn, bringing these guys in? He probably wouldn't give the athletic department the support to go ahead and try and take these chances to be competitive. And when Auburn takes these chances and is competitive, they make a lot of money. Charles Knapp is the same president that was over there at Tulane when he fell asleep at the wheel, and Tulane had that point-shaving scandal, and they had to trash their basketball program altogether. Really wasn't that crazy when this guy came over and took the job. And I'm all for having high academics and wanting good kids to come into school, and it's embarrassing to be somewhat if you have to sit there and you take a bunch of players who, maybe you're sitting there wondering on their grades and all that. Certainly you want to get kids that are solid students, but it doesn't always work that way, and you need some of these kids to win, and money is the bottom line with a lot of these decisions that are made, Jeff.
Well, I think part of the reason with Knapp is that he's almost loyal to a fault to the people over in that athletic department. He's not going to pressure Vince Dooley to make any changes because he feels that Vince Dooley knows what's best for the University of Georgia program.
I disagree with some of his philosophies that he has. I mean, when you sit there and you look at, when you talk about recruiting here, and you talk about Georgia losing a couple of key guys in their state, and you talk about a school that's in a state loaded with talent, and then you got a school like Tennessee, where they didn't have nearly as much talent up there as they had in the state of Georgia. They knew right ahead that they were going to have to go out state and get players. They hit Texas, they hit Oklahoma, they hit the East Coast, and they got big-time players from different regions of the country. The reason Tennessee can do that is because they're smart enough to figure out the power of television. They go out, they get major home-and-home games. They get home-and-homes with Notre Dame and UCLA to where they're televised all over the country. Georgia does not do that. Vince Dooley, the last time he played a road game outside of the Southland during the regular season, I think was 1965 when they went up to Ann Arbor and beat Michigan.
Right.
I mean, you can't do that. With the way television is going right now and the money and the contracts, no, I think he's too narrow-minded. And I thought he wasted year after year after year on those games with Clemson and South Carolina where no one really cared. No, I think Georgia's nothing but a regional program right now because of Vince Dooley when they should be a national program like Tennessee or Alabama.
You had a good point. They need to make some changes there. Okay, Jeff, you mentioned Georgia Tech. I'm worried about this team. Are they going to make it to the NAAC?
Yeah, I think they'll make it to the.
NCAA.
I think they'll make it to the NCAA's. Georgia Tech is a type of team that'll sit there and lose games that they have no business losing, and then they'll turn around and win games that they have no business winning. I think the win against North Carolina will carry a lot of weight. First of all, with their schedule, I think if Tech gets 18 wins, I think they're definitely in. If they get 17, they're on the bubble. 16, no way, they're out. They've got 11 wins right now, so. I think they'll be able to salvage 7 more wins in the season when you count the ACC tournament.
They've got 2 pluses in their favor. They play in the ACC, and they've beaten North Carolina, so I think they will make the tournament as long as they play 500 ball for the rest of the way.
Yeah.
I think what's happened to them after they beat North Carolina, they sort of slid downhill. I think they might got a little cocky there, and we beat Carolina, so it means we can beat anybody, and that's not going to get the job done in the ACC.
And it's not happening either.
No, it's not.
That one game against North Carolina is not going to really hold up a lot. Because last year they were in the same situation and they had to win the last few games, and then they finally made it, and that win against North Carolina in ACC tournament. What's wrong with me?
Getting the alphabet all mixed up tonight.
Yeah, that helped them, but then when they got in, they lost the first game. So.
Well, like I said, they'll go out and win some games that they have no business winning, and they'll lose some they have no business losing. I think that's a very talented team. I question Tech's defensive ability this year. I don't think they're nearly as good as a defensive team as they've been in the past. I think that's their Achilles heel.
I think they're a little weak in the middle this year. They don't have a good big man.
All right. James Forrest didn't get in there like he should have in that last game against Florida State.
The Elisama is a guy from New York. He's not quite on par with what they're used to having there, I think. So.
Right. He's a freshman. He's doing good for his first year.
Okay.
Yeah, I think they are expecting big things out of him.
Right. What about some other upcoming games? How about the Duke against North Carolina?
Big game Thursday night, 1 and 2. I think that North Carolina is the best team in the country, and when it comes to that NCAA tournament, they have so many players and so much depth. They're going to be hard to stop.
Okay, what do you think?
I think North Carolina is probably the favorite to win the ACC, but Duke's going to give them a run. I mean, those are probably the 2 class teams in the conference. So.
I think Carolina will win.
I do too.
All right.
Okay, I'd like to thank you guys and thank our callers. Well, we didn't have any callers, our viewers. And I'd like to thank our sponsors, the Atlanta Knights and the Dirty Owl Salon on Northside Drive. We'll see you next week, Tuesday, 9 p.m., Channel 12. Thank you.